Tonight, right now as you're watching this, millions of Nigerians are looking up at the sky, not for a satellite, not for Starlink. They are looking for a sliver of moon. And depending on whether they find it, Eid could be tomorrow. But here's what nobody is talking about. One man in Sokoto decides whether 100 million Nigerian Muslims break their fast tomorrow or the day after. Not an app, not Saudi Arabia, not your local imam. One man. So the question I want you to sit with before we go deeper is this. How did a traditional ruler in northwest Nigeria end up with that kind of power over the religious calendar of an entire nation? And what happens when people start pushing back? Stay with me. This one goes deeper than the moon. Before we go further, if you're new to Naijanewsfeed, welcome. This channel exists to break down what's really happening in Nigeria, the politics, the power, the people behind the decisions. Hit subscribe and stay with me, because this gets interesting. So let's start with what actually happened. On Wednesday, March 18, 2026, that's today, the 29th day of Ramadan 1447, the Sultan of Sokoto, Al-Haji Mohammed Saad Abubakar, issued a formal directive. He told Muslims across Nigeria to go out after sunset and look for the Shawwal crescent. That's the new moon that signals Ramadan is over and Eid al-Fitr can begin. This isn't unusual. The Sultan does this every single year, at the start of Ramadan and at the end. His office releases a statement, gives out phone numbers, and tells Nigerians, if you see the moon, report it to your district or village head, who then passes it up the chain to Sokoto. The Sultan verifies the reports and makes the official call. Now, why does this matter in 2026 specifically? Because this Ramadan season has not been drama-free. Earlier this year, before Ramadan even started, there were reports of groups and individuals in some parts of the country jumping the gun, making their own announcements about when fasting should begin, without waiting for the Sultan's official word. Southwest Muslim bodies had to publicly back the Sultan's authority. Islamic scholars in Lagos were on platforms reminding people that in Nigeria, this call belongs to one office. That context matters, because tonight's moon sighting is not just a religious ritual, it's also a test of authority. Let's understand the structure here, because most Nigerians don't fully know how this works. The Sultan of Sokoto holds two roles simultaneously. He is the traditional ruler of the Sokoto Caliphate, one of the most powerful traditional institutions in West Africa. But he is also the President General of the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, the NSCIA. That second role is what gives him national religious authority beyond just his region. The NSCIA is the umbrella body for Islamic affairs in Nigeria. It coordinates with the National Moon Sighting Committee, which works alongside the National Space Research and Development Agency, NASDA, to verify credible moon sightings using both traditional reports and scientific instruments. Now, here's where it gets interesting from a constitutional standpoint. Nigeria's constitution guarantees freedom of religion. There is no law that compels any Muslim to follow the Sultan's declaration. What there is tradition, religious consensus, and institutional weight. The Sultan's authority is soft power, but in Nigeria, soft power backed by history and religious legitimacy is enormous. The gray area. There is no legislation that formally grants the Sultan this national role. It has evolved through custom, through the structure of the NSCIA, and through decades of deference. which means if enough voices start challenging it, the structure can be challenged, and that's exactly what has been happening quietly. Who benefits? The Sultan's position as the sole authority on this question is enormously valuable, not just religiously, but politically. Whoever controls the announcement of Eid controls a moment that touches over 100 million Nigerians simultaneously. That's not nothing. That is soft power at a national scale. The Sokoto Sultanate has used this authority to remain relevant and nationally significant even as Nigeria has modernized and power has theoretically shifted to elected officials. Every year, the Sultan's declaration is the top story. Every year, the federal government, state governors, and the president offer Eid congratulations only after the Sultan speaks. That sequence matters. Who is being challenged? Now, earlier this year, before Ramadan began, the NSCIA itself raised an alarm. There were individuals and groups announcing the start of fasting independently, without going through the established process. The Southwest Muslim Ummah of Nigeria, Muswen, had to come out and publicly back the Sultan. That's significant. When your allies are defending you loudly, it means the challenge is real. There's a quiet but growing tension between two ideas. The first says, moon sighting is a national matter and should have a national authority, which is the Sultan. The second says, moon sighting is a local or even personal matter, and no traditional ruler from one region should be dictating the religious calendar of all Nigerian Muslims. That second argument has ethnic undertones that people don't say out loud. Because what it sometimes means is, why should a northern traditional ruler have this authority over southern Muslims? That's the thread under the surface. Electoral dimension. Here's something that got buried in the news cycle. When the NSCIA issued its Ramadan announcement in February 2026, it also raised a complaint that INEC had scheduled the presidential election during Ramadan and that governorship elections could fall on Eid day itself. The council said it was watching developments and hoped for a review. Think about what that means. The Sultan's institution is now positioning itself as a stakeholder in Nigeria's electoral calendar. That is a political move, whether people frame it religiously or not. And it tells you something important. The NSCIA is not just a religious body, it is a political actor with interests in governance. Silent stakeholders. Who else has skin in this game? State governors in the north, whose relationships with the Sultanate determine a lot about local stability. The presidency, which needs Muslim votes and Muslim peace. And quietly, foreign Islamic bodies, including institutions from Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, who have their own views on how moon sighting should be done globally and are funding Islamic education in Nigeria.
Now, let's zoom out. What does this mean for Nigeria as a whole? First, interfaith relations. Every time the Sultan makes a national Eid declaration, it's a reminder that Islam in Nigeria has a centralized structure that Christianity does not. There is no equivalent Christian figure in Nigeria who speaks for all Nigerian Christians simultaneously. That asymmetry is noted by everyone, even if few say so publicly. Second, economic impact. Eid al-Fitr moves markets. When Eid is declared, traders, transport workers, market sellers, hotels, airlines, they all respond. A one-day difference in the announcement can shift millions in commerce. The Sultan's declaration is not just spiritually significant, it has real naira value. Third, security. In the north especially, an organized unified Eid celebrated on one date reduces the risk of flashpoints. When communities celebrate on different days because of fragmented authority, it creates confusion and sometimes tension. The Sultan's role in anchoring a single national date has a real security function that often goes unacknowledged. Now, let's take this global for a moment, because there is an international dimension here that most Nigerian coverage ignores. Saudi Arabia has already announced its own moon sighting and Eid date. For many years, some Nigerian Muslims, especially those educated in Saudi institutions or following Salafi traditions, have argued that Nigeria should simply align with Saudi Arabia. Why do we need our own committee, they ask, when the Haramain has already declared? The NSCIA's position has consistently been Nigeria follows Nigeria's moon. The Shawwal crescent must be physically sighted within Nigerian territory. This isn't stubbornness, it's actually aligned with classical Islamic scholarship, the principle that moon sighting is a local matter, not a global one. But here's the tension for Nigerians in the diaspora, in the UK, in the US, in Canada. Which date do you follow? Your country of residence, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria, the Sultan of Sokoto? This has become a real pastoral headache for diaspora Muslim communities, and it reflects the broader fragmentation of Islamic authority in the modern world. Now, let me still man the critics because it's important to be fair here. Some people argue that in the age of satellites, telescopes, and astronomy, the traditional moon sighting process is outdated. They say scientific calculation should just determine the Islamic calendar and we don't need anyone looking at the sky with their naked eyes. This is actually a legitimate scholarly debate within Islam globally. It's not fringe thinking. Others argue that concentrating this authority in one traditional ruler in one part of Nigeria is a remnant of northern political dominance that does not reflect Nigeria's diversity. They point out that Nigeria is 36 states, multiple geopolitical zones, and over 200 million people, and the religious calendar of Muslims shouldn't flow through a single palace in Sokoto. These are real arguments, but here's what those arguments don't account for. Fragmented authority on this question in a country with Nigeria's religious fault lines is genuinely dangerous. What you gain in decentralization, you risk losing in unity. The NSCIA structure, imperfect as it is, has delivered relatively peaceful Eid transitions in a country where the slightest religious friction can turn violent. That record deserves credit. Now, what this story ultimately tells us about Nigeria is this: we are a country that holds together through informal authority as much as formal law. The Sultan's power here is not in the constitution, it's in the consensus, and consensus is always fragile. Now, if what I just broke down surprised you, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. Do you think the Sultan should have this authority, or should this be decentralized? Because the next part of this video is where I tell you what to actually watch for going forward. So, what happens next? Here's what to watch.
Watch whether the crescent is sighted tonight or not. If it is, Eid is Thursday, March 19. If it isn't, fasting continues one more day and Eid becomes Friday, March 20. Either way, the Sultan makes the call and the country responds. But beyond tonight, here's the bigger signal to watch. The NSCIA has already flagged the election calendar conflict. If INEC does not adjust the governorship election date away from Eid, watch for escalation. That could become the flashpoint where the Sultanate's political role becomes much more explicit and much more contested. Also watch what happens in the next Ramadan cycle. Will the early moon sighting disputes resurface? Will any organized group try to formally challenge the NSCIA's monopoly on this announcement? Because if that challenge comes with legal backing, through the courts or through legislation, it could fundamentally reshape the relationship between traditional, religious, and civil authority in Nigeria. Long term, the Sultan's authority here is secure for now, but it is not eternal. It depends on consensus, and consensus in Nigeria has a way of dissolving faster than anyone expects. So let me bring this home. I opened by asking, how does one man in Sokoto end up deciding the Eid date for 100 million Nigerians? The answer is, he doesn't do it by force. He does it by consensus, by history, by a structure that Nigeria has maintained because the alternative, fragmentation,
is worse. But that consensus is being quietly tested, and the questions being raised about authority, about ethnicity, about modernity, about politics, those questions are not going away. Whether the moon is sighted tonight or tomorrow, Eid Mubarak to every Muslim watching this. You've made it through another Ramadan in a tough year for Nigeria. That deserves respect. And to everyone watching, Muslim or not, this story is about more than religion. It's about how Nigeria holds itself together. And that's a story we should all be paying attention to. If this breakdown gave you a new way of seeing this story, do me a favor, share it with one person who needs to understand what's really going on. Like the video, subscribe to Naijanewsfeed, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay sharp. Eid Mubarak.